I have a question.
Yeah.
So I hear folks talk about what to do when you're pulled over by a police officer. And there are people that say when you're pulled over, you should, when you give them your license and registration, also give them your concealed pistol license or whatever, in your state, whatever the equivalent is, right? And I always thought that was kind of a silly thing to do. What are your thoughts?
So there's some, it depends on the state. There's
Right.
some states that require you to identify yourself as somebody who is carrying a gun. So obviously in that state, you would probably want to follow that rule. Follow that law.
Yeah.
In the state of Washington where we all live, that's not the case, so you don't have to. So you don't have to do anything. So part of it depends on like why do they pull you over? Like if you're a loser and a dirtbag and they pulled you over for something that is like likely criminal, then you should be concerned, and you shouldn't be doing that in the first place.
Right.
But then if they're pulling you over for speeding, is it likely that they're going to pull you out of the car and do something? Probably not, right? And so you just ran the stop sign or you were just speeding, then you can decide how you want to interact with that. If you don't want to deal with the whole thing, then don't deal with the whole thing. What some, particularly newer police officers, what some people will do, and some people are trained to do this, is there's a gun there and it's their scene to investigate, and so they're going to pull you out of the car and put you in handcuffs and remove your gun and make the scene safe for them until they're done with their business, right? And so you don't know who you're interacting with, and they like that is on the that's an extreme perspective, but they're within their legal right to do that, and so it's possible that they put you in handcuffs and treat you like a criminal, and that would feel really bad, right? Like you probably would make for a very unpleasant experience. They can do that. So if you tell them you have a gun, it's possible that happens.
Right.
If they're pulling you over for something else, and like your car matches the description of some car that just robbed someplace and drove away or whatever, or just committed a theft, and they pull you out and detain you for something else, and they find you have a gun, then like you might have other problems. But if it's speeding, you can either do that or not do that, and you got to decide that. So I guess then the question is, first question is, do you identify yourself or not? So those are some factors to think about. The next question is, if I identify myself as someone carrying a gun, how do I do that? Okay, there's obviously lots of different ways to do that. They can come up and they can say, do you have your driver's license registration? You say, I got a gun, right? And
here it is.
Yep, and that probably, or like, there's lots of things you can do, and like on the extreme case, like we can all say, well, all of those things both of those examples are bad examples, so don't do that. You can hand them their license and registration, and you can politely tell them, I have a concealed pistol license and I'm currently carrying a gun. You can do that. One of the things to think about though is if you verbally interact with somebody, the courteous thing to do is to respond verbally. Right? And so you're forcing them to either be rude or to interact. And most cops are not conditioned to interact with, like, most cops are trained to deal with guns one way. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's like all of their training and time related to guns is focused on bad guys have guns, and I like point guns back and I order people around and I use force against people who have guns. Does that make sense? So you're kind of, in one sense, you're like, well, that doesn't, like, why did they react that way? Like, that was weird. But from their perspective, that's like what they're trained to do. And so you're putting them into a weird situation. So I actually think if you want to communicate to them, doing it in a nonverbal way, which doesn't require any interaction, right? Because you can, if someone shows you a sign, it's really easy to ignore the sign and move on, versus if someone walks up to you and asks you a question. Does that make sense? Like the distinction there in terms of how you can like ignore something or not. And so if I hand them my driver's license and registration and I hand them my concealed pistol license at the same time, that does not require any sort of verbal interaction, and they can not be rude, they can ignore it, they can do whatever, but they know, right? You've effectively communicated to them. If I just pull out my concealed pistol license and put it on the table here, like most people are going to think, oh, if they know what it is, oh, he's got a gun, right? That would be a natural thing to conclude, is that I have a gun, but I haven't really told you that overtly, and I haven't forced you to interact with that. So that police officer can then decide, he can just give it back to you, or he can ask you about it. The likelihood, like if the person is a gun guy, it's highly likely that the conversation turns into some interesting conversation about the kind of gun you have and the kind of guns they have, and you end up with some rapport and camaraderie, and it ends up being a positive outcome, right? That's like, I know several people who are like, I always pull out my concealed pistol license, hand it to them no matter what, because like I speed all the time, and 9 times out of 10 I don't get a ticket because of it. Because the interaction turns into a positive interaction about guns, and there you go. So there's some people who use it to their advantage. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. It also depends on you. Like Ted, right? Ted is probably getting himself out of a ticket because he's like gregarious, fun, nice guy. I'm probably not, right? Because I'm not that guy. And so I'm probably getting a ticket no matter what.